My parents skipped my biggest milestone, then messaged demanding $2,100. No congratulations, only urgency. I answered with the sentence they taught me for years: respect first, then support. I did not shout. I did not chase. I held their rule up like a mirror and asked them to live by it too. Was that petty revenge too far, or simply fair? Tonight we begin with the moment the request arrived and the rain grew quiet. Let me rewind to the beginning, to understand my answer. You need to see the day we planned and the promises that set the stage. I am the oldest child in a family that loves the photograph of success more than the daily work it takes to earn it. For years I woke before sunrise and fell asleep after midnight, stacking lectures on top of library shifts and a tutoring job that barely covered bus fare. The milestone was graduation. Imagine a rented auditorium that smelled like old paper and lemon polish, rows of folding chairs that pinched at the back of your knees, and a glossy program as thick as a small novel with my name buried somewhere inside. Weeks beforehand, my parents filled our family chat with bright messages. Early in May, they wrote that the day was circled and they would not miss it. Later in May, my mother sent a cheerful selfie with a graduation cap emoji and promised she would cry happy tears. Just before the ceremony, my father said they would arrive early for photos by the fountain. Dinner at my favorite Thai place was the capstone plan. They promised. They used that word like a ribbon tied around a box. If you met my parents at a neighborhood barbecue, you might call them charming. If you lived in our house, you might choose a different word. Entitled is not about expensive taste. It is an expectation that everyone else will swivel to the rhythm of your schedule because your wants weigh more. My childhood came with flexible rules that always bent in the same direction. There was a rule about no rides after dark, unless my father needed one. There was a rule about no loans inside the family, unless my mother's card was acting strange and I had cash. The shiniest rule appeared when I asked for help. Respect first, then support. We show up for people who show up for us. It is a beautiful sentence when it is practiced. It is a shield when it is used to refuse effort. I wish I could tell you that I pushed back cleanly from the beginning. The truth is softer and a little embarrassing. I complied. When my mother texted near midnight that the banking app was acting strange, I sent $120 and paid my own bill late. When my father asked me to tune the slides for a presentation on the only Saturday I had saved for a midterm review, I brewed coffee and did it while my notes waited in the corner. When I needed help. The velvet rope appeared. Respect first, then support. They said it while I was standing there offering respect with both hands. I told myself that flexibility was maturity, and that maturity would eventually be rewarded. Patterns do not reward you for feeding them. They simply grow. Graduation day arrived cool and gray, which felt like a gift when you are wrapped in a black robe that turns into a small greenhouse. I pressed the gown, pinned the cap, and sent a cheerful message to the chat that I was leaving and would meet them at the west gate near the elm tree. I pictured the photo by the fountain, the dinner after, the ride home with a paper sleeve of leftover spring rolls fogging the bag. Campus bloomed with parents carrying bouquets and siblings waving poster board signs dotted with glitter. The bench by the gate was empty. I checked my phone and told myself they were parking. I checked again and told myself they were walking. 10 minutes became 20. I took a picture of my shoes and the edge of my gown because pointing the camera at the bench made my stomach tilt. The ceremony began, and I filed in with my row when my name was called. The applause sounded like rain on a metal roof, kind and general, not for me in particular. I scanned the seats. No mother, no father. A friend's mother, who has hugged me exactly twice, stood and cheered like I had invented flight. I smiled at her and tucked that kindness in my pocket. Afterward, I returned to the gate, half expecting to see my parents jogging toward me with breathless apologies. The bench under the elm did not change. I took the fountain photo alone with my phone balanced against a bottle of water and a book. A classmate's family offered to take one, and I said yes, then said thank you too many times because my mouth needed something to do. I typed into the family chat that the ceremony had ended and I was heading to the fountain. The message sat there like a small boat on a flat lake. You know the private click that happens inside when a switch flips from maybe to enough. That click happened. It was not loud. It was precise. On the walk home, I took an inventory of what respect means to me. It is not perfection. Life throws nails on the road. It is presence, which looks like a message before the moment collapses. It is a screenshot of a detour. It is a new plan that becomes a table and a bill, even if it is a week later. I feared that naming what I needed would make me difficult or ungrateful. I imagined conflict as a cliff and myself as a cartoon character stepping off it. Dignity is not a fall. Dignity is ground when you stand on it. The horizon stops wobbling. I also counted my fear of the family echo chamber. In my family, disappointment travels fast and arrives dressed as a sermon about gratitude. If I called out a broken promise, there would be a montage of roofs and meals presented like an eternal invoice. There would be relatives who were not present instructing me to be the bigger person, which is a polite way to say, be quiet so we do not have to rearrange anything. Fear shrinks when you place it next to facts. Facts are not hot. They do not win arguments by volume. They hold the edges in place. So I made a decision as the sky turned from gray to brighter. I would use their sentence the way they used it with me, not sarcastically, not as a trap, simply as a level placed on a crooked shelf. No support without attendance. No support without notice. Respect first, then support. If that is our family value, let us make it mutual. I did not need an apology speech. I needed a plan that looked like showing up. I wrote a boundary statement to myself in words simple enough to remember when I was tired. I am happy to support family when we are supporting each other. From now on, money and favors will follow presence and notice. If you cannot show up or communicate, I will not be able to contribute. Respect first, then support. I practiced reading it aloud so I would not soften it with apologies or turn it into a question. A boundary is not a performance. It is a setting. You switch it on and the room makes sense. Guilt tripping works because it borrows your good intentions and turns them into a leash. It presses two buttons at once: the wish to be seen as kind and the fear of disappointing family. Name the tactic and the spell loosens. Say to yourself, this is guilt, not guidance. Breathe, sit up, and ask simple questions. What is being asked? What is reasonable today? What would respect look like from both sides? When you label the pattern, your choices get wider and your words grow calmer. Now hold that picture of the empty bench. Here is the moment the messages arrived, the request landed, and the rule began to matter. My phone buzzed while I was still in the black robe. A message from my mother appeared. She wrote, "Can you send $2,100 today? It is urgent. Family helps family." There was no congratulations, there was no photo request, only a number and a proverb. A few breaths later, my father followed with the same tone. He wrote, "Wire it now. We will explain later." It landed with the weight of a gavel, the familiar phrase they used whenever they wanted the conversation to end before it began. Family helps family. I stared at the words and felt that old dryness in my throat, the feeling that arrives when disappointment finds its favorite staircase and heads down. I made myself type slowly, because speed is the enemy of judgment. I wrote, "Hey, what is the emergency? Can you share what this is for? I am on my way home. If it is serious, we can talk tonight." I added a small bridge. "If you are stuck somewhere, I can call." My goal was not to win the next 5 minutes. My goal was to keep the rest of the week from catching fire. Questions and calendars are water. Exclamation marks are gasoline. I offered time, a phone call, and a plan. I did not offer money, not yet. The replies arrived quickly and with heat. My mother wrote that after everything they had done for me, she could not believe my attitude. My father added that the extended family believed they had raised a grateful child and I was making them look foolish. A cropped photo of a bill arrived, then a voice note. I kept my responses short and factual. I wrote, "I need to know what this payment is for. Please send the full invoice. We can talk this evening." When the messages tried to turn the moment into a trial about my character, I refused that path and walked back to nouns and numbers. A feeling cannot choke you when it does not get oxygen. That was the lesson I repeated as I put the phone face down and breathed like I was cooling tea. Pause with me. Feel the heat settle. Now we gather facts, line up receipts, and tell the story in a way anyone could audit. I opened a fresh note and began to line up the receipts like small stones you can step across. First, the promises. Early in May, my parents wrote in the family chat that the day was circled and they would not miss it. A week later, my mother sent a selfie with a graduation cap emoji and said she would cry happy tears just before the ceremony. My father promised they would be early for pictures by the fountain. Next, the cancellation. On the morning of the ceremony, not long after breakfast, they wrote that traffic was terrible, they might skip the formalities, and I should save seats for dinner. The dinner never happened. Last, the earlier money favors. In the middle of January, I sent $120 because the banking app was acting strange. In the beginning of February, I covered $85 for a prescription pickup. In the beginning of March, I sent $60 for gas with a promise of repayment the coming Friday. A promise that drifted away. Near the end of April, I transferred $150 for utilities that were off that month. In the middle of May, I sent $45 for a delivery tip. None of this proved anyone was cruel. It proved a pattern. Promises were loud. Follow-through was quiet. Money moved quickly. Presents did not move at all. I wrote the timeline as if a neutral person would read it with a pencil in hand. During May, there were multiple confirmations that they would be there. On the morning of the ceremony, there was a breezy message suggesting that skipping the important part might be fine. That afternoon, only a little while after my name was called, a request arrived for $2,100 with the line about family helping family. After that came my questions, then the guilt notes, then the accusations. While the earlier ledger showed 5 separate requests for help from me and not a single example of equal presence for my milestone. I am not a judge, but any spreadsheet would know where to place a green check mark and where to leave a box empty. I decided that from this point forward I would keep everything in writing. I said it plainly so there would be no surprise. I texted that all communication would stay in writing because that would make it easier for everyone to track. Written channels protect both sides. They slow the spin and lift the facts. If there is genuine urgency, a complete invoice can be attached. If there is confusion, the exact words and the time they arrived keep the edges honest. Written records also protect me from the story that changes in retelling, the one where I supposedly promised to send money I never agreed to send, or the one where I never asked for details. This was not about catching anyone doing wrong. This was about clarity that could hold the weight of a relationship without bending. Receipts are not aggression. Receipts are clarity, dates, amounts, and exact wording do not attack a person. They illuminate the room so both people can see the same furniture. Written proof protects everyone, not only you. It keeps the story from changing with each retelling. It turns arguments about character into conversations about events. When you feel accused, reach for a record, not for adjectives. When you feel tempted to exaggerate, let the record hold you steady. Clarity is not cold. Clarity is kind. With the pattern in plain view, it is time to answer. I will use the sentence they taught me and apply it evenly to us all. I scrolled back through the family chat and found the sentence that had been used like a household law. I copied it exactly so there would be no argument about memory, no support without attendance, no support without notice. I placed those words at the top of a new message and wrote one plain sentence beneath them. Let us make this our shared policy. I did not attack the spirit of the rule. I honored it. If we agree that showing up matters, then we can live by that value together. I reminded them, gently, that this exact phrase had been used when I needed rides, when I asked for help with fees, and when I hoped for practical support that clashed with their plans. I was not asking for anything right now. I was asking for the rule to be even. Then I stated my boundary in daylight language. I wrote that I would not send money first. I would begin with respect first. Then we could discuss support. I wrote that I was willing to revisit everything after an apology and a plan to celebrate together, even if the celebration happened next week or next month. I said I hoped we could repair this and that I would keep my tone calm and my expectations realistic. I made it unmistakable that this was not punishment. This was a safe order. Respect first, then money. Presents first, then favors. After I pressed send, I set the phone face down and let silence do its work. The replies swept in like a quick summer squall. I was called ungrateful. I was told I was embarrassing them in front of relatives. There was a warning that certain aunts would be told I was keeping score. I did not bite. I repeated the policy and stayed with the facts. I wrote, "I am following your rule. There is no support without attendance or notice. When we show up for each other, I am happy to help." I added nothing sharp. I removed anything that sounded like a biography lesson. The sentence that had governed our house now had a level under it. It felt strangely quiet. It felt like placing a book flat on a table and watching it stop wobbling. Boundaries do not fence out love. Boundaries create a door that asks for a knock. They protect relationships from the quiet rot of resentment. A clear boundary offers a real choice. Meet me here. At respect, if you can. We grow, if you cannot. We rest. Either way. The pretending stops and everyone can tell the truth about what they are willing to give. The final messages have been sent. Let us see what actually changed afterward, not in theory, but in the quiet days that followed. For a little while, there was thunder with no rain. Messages came in sharp and fast. Then the thread went quiet. That evening, my aunt called. She has a voice made of warm blankets, which is probably why the family often sends her to soften landings. She said my parents were embarrassed. She also said she understood why I wanted everything in writing. The next afternoon, my mother sent a note that read like an apology, written in a rushing elevator. She said they were proud of me, that they did not mean to miss the ceremony, that stress had made them snap. My father sent 2 short lines about traffic and feeling overwhelmed. There was no photo of flowers. There was no dinner plan. It was not nothing. And it was not enough. I thanked them for reaching out and repeated the policy with the calm of a weather report. Respect first, then support. I added that I would be happy to celebrate the following week if they chose a day and kept it. The money conversation stopped. The calendar conversation began. That was the first practical change. The ripples arrived in steady circles. In the week that followed, texts were less demanding and more specific. When someone asked for help, the message came with a reason, a time frame, and sometimes a document. When plans shifted, I received a heads up before the moment of impact. Contact grew clearer. Sometimes it softened into silence. The quiet felt different than before. It did not feel like punishment. It felt like a reset, the kind you do with a device when an app freezes and you want things to work again. A cousin checked in and said my mother had shared a gentler version of events and that she was relieved I kept things in writing because family stories often change shape depending on who is telling them. Over the next month, there were fewer floating accusations and more plain sentences. I still did small favors when I could. I also said no, without a long paragraph explaining my heart. Even the quiet had edges I could see. Here is what I learned and what I would hand to anyone standing where I stood. Write your boundary statement like a recipe card that lives on the inside of a cabinet door. Keep it short enough to say when you are tired and your feelings want to run the show. Something like this: I am happy to support family when we are supporting each other. From now on, money and favors will follow presence and notice. If you cannot show up or communicate, I will not be able to contribute. Respect first, then support. Keep the conversation in writing whenever you can. Written words protect both sides. They turn heat into facts. They let you attach a complete document if there is a true emergency. They prevent the story from changing with every retelling. In your own mind. Separate respect from money. Money can feel like a quick repair, but it is only a bandage. Presence is repair. A message that arrives before a plan collapses is repair. An apology with a date attached is repair. When you ask people to meet you at respect, you are not asking for a parade. You are asking for a door that opens from both directions. We have the results and the ripples. Now I will name the lesson. Offer a simple policy you can use and ask for your verdict. If I could rewind the tape, I would set expectations earlier. 1 to 2 weeks before the ceremony, I would send a note that described exactly what would feel like support and what I would do if plans changed. I would loop in a neutral relative to help with reminders and logistics. Not as a judge, simply as a helpful calendar that can nudge without drama. I would keep talk of money away from the day itself. Numbers do not belong in the same breath as a milestone. If a money talk needed to happen, I would schedule it for another day and another place. I would tell my closest friends how to backstop me if plans fell apart. One friend to hold the camera, one friend to stand at the gate. These are not grand gestures. They are small hinges that let a day open. If this calm revenge story gave you clarity or comfort, tap subscribe and join me for new episodes each week. Now, I would love your verdict. Was this petty revenge justified, or did it go too far? Vote in the poll below. Then tell me what respect, first then support would look like in your life. Share one line you could use the next time guilt knocks on your door. When you are ready for more, visit the playlist called Revenge Stories and keep listening with the rain.